Hey, welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Bruce, and we are starting a monthly segment. This is going to be once a month, roughly speaking, around the fundamentals of getting better flow happening in your joinery business. So today I'm going to talk about 5S. 5S is a methodology created by Toyota. And it essentially is a conversion of some of their methodologies. Obviously, if we convert from Japanese terms to English terms, they probably don't make as much sense if they get converted directly. So 5S has been converted so that us English-speaking people can understand it clearly. And 5S is just a really simple methodology to follow in the early days of setting up your factory following lean principles. So 5S stands for sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. And it's one of the most fundamental methodologies that you'll find when we're trying to create better flow in a factory. So today what I thought I would do is I'd break down the steps in really simple, easy to follow steps. This is, just so that you know, this is what we teach in our manufacturing excellence program. This is taught at the fundamentals level because it's just the basic cornerstone of what we need to get you doing. So I'm going to walk you through some of the 3F or the factory flow fundamentals elements that we give everybody. And if you'd like more information on this, if you'd like to get a little bit more deeper learning, just book a call. Wherever you're watching this, it might be on social media, put a little chat in the bottom saying, I want more. Go to our website, thejoinerycoach.com, and book a call and you can learn a little bit more. But in this conversation, I'm going to give you some really valuable stuff. Okay, so as I said, this is a fundamental element of our coaching and training in lean manufacturing and specifically in joinery businesses. So 5S in practice, what it actually looks like, because we can get bogged down in some of the words and the terminology and what it's all actually saying, but I think it's important to actually see what this looks like in practice. Very often I will go into a new factory, a new client, and I'll want to look in the corners. I'll want to look in the small areas, like for example, the storage room. And in this example you can see here on your screen, I went into this storage room, and by the way, if you're listening to this on a podcast, I'll explain what we're showing here. We're showing a very, very, very disorganized storage room, and on the opposite side of it, after a few months of organization, it's very organized. And in practice, the benefit of doing this, the tangible results are, in this particular situation where people would go into this storage room multiple times a day and spend up to 5 minutes just looking for things. Now, when it's organized, people would go in here less times because a lot of this stuff that was in this storage room is actually now at the bench where you need it. So there's no limited number of traffic trips back and forth to the storage room. But when there was a trip in the storage room, it only would take them up to 5 seconds, as opposed to 2 to 5 minutes people were spending in the storage room on average, just trying to find things. So in practice, getting organized has a profitable outcome as well as a cultural improvement outcome, a safety outcome, customer experience outcome. It's just nothing but good stuff, right? So in practice, this is what it looks like. It goes from clutter, chaos, disorganization to really a beautiful place to live in. The principles of 5S are certainly around organization, finding locations for things, but it does go beyond housekeeping. It goes beyond how do we get organized and stay organized. Look, it's really, really easy for you to clean up. We can go for 2 months making a heck of a mess and then clean it up. Now that's not 5S. That's just bad practice, right? Because as you're making a mess, you're working less effectively and you're creating a safety hazard and potentially making mistakes and errors, right? Because if you're working in chaos, it's pretty hard to even see the quality of the work you're doing. So 5S principles kind of follow organization, making sure everything has a location, and going beyond housekeeping. You will know if you're organized or if you're not by just how much time do you actually spend looking for things. If you actually spend a lot of time just finding things, you'll know yourself whether you're organized or whether you're not. A little statistic for you that you might find this interesting. The average worker here, now these are Australian statistics. I suspect they are probably very similar all around the world. The average statistic for workers here in Australia, in your average manufacturing facility, like a manufacturing of joinery or furniture or cabinet making, is somewhere in the order of a total of 6 weeks out of every year. Someone working in these places is spending walking around looking for things. That's not always just looking for tools. It might be work instruction, it might be materials, but it's a lot of wasted time, isn't it? If you're talking about every single person you have on the payroll is spending 6 weeks out of every year doing nothing but trying to work but can't because they can't find the stuff to do the work. You only have to do the math there to add up 6 weeks times everybody times what you're paying. That's a significant amount of money. So is this worth it? Is this not worth it? Well, I think you can do the math yourself, and there's nothing but upside in all of this. So without 5S, without organization in the workplace, you spend a lot of time just looking for things. You spend a lot of time also moving things around. Like we often see people, stacking things up in front of the rack. And then 2 days later, you need the stuff in the rack. So then you've got to move that stuff just to get at the stuff in the rack. There's also a lot of walking back and forth. So, without organization and good workplace systems, there's just a lot of human movement going around doing things. So to begin flow improvement with 5S, we don't look at all 5S's all at once. What we do is we break it down into the first three. And the first three are sort, set, and shine. So in short terms, what sort means is let's actually get rid of everything that you don't need. So very often I'll go into a cabinet shop and we will see up on the mezzanine storage area, there's the unused weightlifting bench, or there's the unused exercise bike, or the couch that you're not using. There's all this stuff. There's this clutter in the factory because there's a space for it. But there also might be a whole stack of board that's been sitting there for 5 years and you're just holding on to it. It's commonly known as hoarding. So we want to get really, really clinical about what you need, what you actually need to have in the workspace. And the more clinical you get with this, the more really specific and narrow you get with this, the better your environment is going to be. So get very, very, very hard-nosed about this. When you have something, if it is not specifically assigned for a job, you probably don't need it. If it's not something that you are very likely to use for a client, because maybe you have a client that has an ongoing contract with you, and maybe you don't have the order yet, but you know it's going to come in the month, then okay, fair enough, you would hold on to that inventory of something. But if you actually have a big list of things that's just been hanging around for a couple of years, you just need to get rid of it. We're not saying throw everything in landfill either. What we are saying is make use of best practice, thinking about environmental standards and recycling and all that sort of thing. You can give things away. You can put things on Marketplace. Maybe you do throw some things out. But the bottom line is you have a business to run, and if we want to make it effective and efficient and profitable, we really need to get rid of the stuff you don't need. Because if you don't need it, you don't need it. Let's get rid of it. So once you've got an organized environment where it's free of clutter and it's free of chaos, what we can then really do, and this might be as you're doing the sort part of it, we can actually start talking about where should things go. And these are conversations like, I have a screw gun, where should it be? I have a tape measure, where should it be? In my assembly bench, what do I need here? If you need to have, for example, a laminate trimmer close to your bench, then that's where it should be stored. So we start talking about setting up the factory and having locations for things. And while we're doing that, we're actually creating a shine environment, which is, let's clean the place up. Let's get rid of all the dust and all the buildup of dust over the years. Let's paint some walkways. Let's maybe talk about having zones. So the assembly area might be green, the machining area might be red. Let's create some specific areas so that the tools in an area, if the tool's green, you know it's supposed to be an assembly. So if you have a green tool in the red zone, then clearly it's not supposed to be there. And so make sure everything is as it should be, nice and clean, in good repair, and you don't have a bunch of stuff lying around that's old and worn out. One of the best ways to do this, to put a bit of a gauge or let's say a measurement on whether an area is up to standard or whether it isn't, is to just simply audit the areas. So if you're looking for an audit sheet, just send me a message. If you like this sheet, I can hook you up. Just send a reply. If you're listening to this on the podcast, join us in our Facebook group, the Joinery Business Hub, and we can get you the audit sheet. This is just a really simple tool that just says, okay, if we're going to sort your factory out, let's look at things like, do you have a red tag area? Do you have stuff that's unneeded? Are we actually free of clutter? Let's create some steps so that we can work through this. So an audit sheet is a really good way to say, when you look at your factory, how well are the things sorted out? Are you a 1 out of 5 or are you a 4 out of 5? And you can do regular audits, once every couple of months. An audit of the factory is a good thing to do. So you might audit how well you've sorted your factory out. You might audit how well things are set in order. So if you're going into your factory and auditing the set stage, you're looking for things like, are things put back in locations? Do they have locations? Do we have a standard? Those sorts of things. So you can actually create an audit, and this sheet actually walks you through that audit. It's a good starting place. It's a baseline. And what it does is it says, okay, we might be really good now, but 6 months later, maybe we slip back a little bit. And the audit will identify that you've slipped back, and then it will identify where you slipped back and then give you ideas as to where you need to go to start getting back up to the level that you want to be. So sorting is really the cornerstone, getting rid of everything you don't need. So, getting rid of stuff you don't need, recycle it, donate it to charity, get rid of it, but be really brutal about it. One of the most common lean tools is to create an area that's what we commonly call the red tag area. Now, often we don't go into the depths of actually logging the things that are there, but one of the really common practices is to actually have an area, call it your red tag area, and that area is the place that things go. If you're not really going to throw them out, but they're not really useful for something, so you might have, an old screw gun that's still useful, but nobody uses it anymore. Put it in the red tag area. But let's be really clear about this. The red tag area is not the new place where things are going to sit for 10 years. The red tag area has a limit to it. So in other words, these things are going to sit here for a couple of weeks. And after those 2 weeks, if there's still things here, they are going to go to recycling or they're going to go to the donation box. But they're not going to be there for any longer than 2 weeks. So that's what that area is used for. And it's a really effective way to find those things that you're not really sure about. Take photos before you even start doing this. This is a really, really effective way to create a baseline, because when you have the photo of what this looked like before you started, and then you clean the place up and make it look really neat and tidy, and you take that photo, you're going to see such a dramatic difference between the two standards. And the two pictures are really important because it shows you progression. It makes you feel really good about the work that you've done. So take photos. You can't take enough photos. In this day and age, you can take 1 million photos on your phone and not use any storage. So advice I'd give you is to take a ton of photos. When you're setting things up, making sure that you might consider having consideration of where something goes based on how frequently it's going to be used. So the less frequent you're going to use something, the less it needs to be in the common area. It might be stored in an area that people would walk to, because you're only going to have to walk there once every couple of weeks. But if you need something right at your workbench, make sure that the things that you have are set in order at your workbench without needing to walk any more than a step or two away. So set has some methodology to it. So make sure that you do this together with your team. One of the biggest downfalls of doing this that we've seen lean specialists is they will have a specialist come in and tell everybody what to do, and then everybody will just do what they're told, and then when that specialist leaves, they just go back to their old ways. So it's really, really important that when your team is engaging in this process, they're actually deciding what you do and how you do it and where you do it and all that sort of thing. So it needs to be done together, really, really closely, with the team unity. make sure that that's part of their decision-making process, not something they're being told to do just because you're telling them to do it. And when you shine things up, when you get to the shine stage, make sure that this is done really, really well. It is possible to have a nice, clean, and tidy floor. There's no reason why there has to be dust everywhere, because if things aren't being swept, and kept clean regularly, that just simply means you probably don't have a schedule of, who should be cleaning up. There's no housekeeping schedule to things. But there's really no reason why you should be working in chaos and disorder and dust. It's unhealthy, it's unsafe. And the other thing to consider is oftentimes we might bring the customer through the factory and show them this is the place that you might have your kitchen built in. Your factory should be your second showroom. It should be the place that you show people with a great degree of pride. And if that's not the case, there is absolutely nothing stopping us from being able to change that. Because physically we are totally able to go into a factory and clean it up and make it shiny. So everybody needs to know their responsibilities when we're doing something like this. Everybody needs to have a place. Make sure that everybody on your team knows exactly what their roles and responsibilities are. So for example, you might have someone assigned to clean and tidy the laminate rack. Someone might be assigned to taking apart the edge tape rack, which is often, in total chaos, and making a new one and putting everything back with labels on them, nice and tidied and ordered. These are all just basic fundamental things that once you get the ball rolling on them, it's going to be part of your team focus. So those are the first 3 S's, the sort, set, and shine. Those are the things that we could quite often work with someone for maybe a year, 18 months. Honestly, it might take that long until this is embedded in the psyche and the DNA of how businesses operate. But in doing that, we also create the next 2 standards, or the next 2 5S levels, which is how do we make this a standard way of doing things, and how do we sustain this level moving forward? Sustaining it is kind of about an audit, so you might embed a regular audit that happens every 2 months or 3 months so that the level stays high, so it doesn't slip back and we keep it going. But making things standard simply is a way of saying in our practices of how we do things, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that's a practice, or that's a standard operating procedure. You want to make sure that in that procedure of, for example, assembling cabinets, one of the steps towards the end of assembling a cabinet probably should be tidying up the area. Machining board, part of the steps of machining board should be cleaning up the machine. And if those things are not in the standard operating procedure of doing things, then they're not going to be a standard way that the business runs, and they're going to eventually, the result is eventually going to be this big unorganized factory. So it is really, really easy to create a nice, tidy, organized factory. It is easy to make it so that we've got a lot of audits happening, we've got a lot of things going in place, and make sure that there's a lot of questions coming up. One of the best ways to measure how engaged a team is or how effective things are moving forward is to measure how many questions are being asked. If you're actually doing this 5S approach to factory flow, and you have no questions coming from the factory floor, don't let that go on any longer. So if there's no questions coming from the team doing it, what they're doing is they're actually just asking you to tell them what's the next thing to do. And that's not really how you're going to create a really great new culture in your workplace. So if you're finding that you're implementing this, but you're not getting any questions or any engagement from your team, that's probably the trigger to say, I'm going to stop now and ask the question, do you have any questions? And if they're not getting any questions, you need to probe a little bit deeper and say, okay, are you guys really sure on what you're doing here? But it really is the cornerstone of learning, because as you're doing new things, there's no way you're going to do it the first time right every single time. And when you start out, there should be quite a few questions coming forward. So that's the cornerstone. That's one of the first sort of level foundations that we want to talk about. So if you have any questions about this, again, please reach out. We're more than happy to help. But that's a really quick, brief overview of what's known as 5S, mostly focusing on the first 3 S's if you're starting out and doing this for the first time. All right, guys, hopefully that's been helpful. Again, if you need any more help, reach out. If you'd like a copy of this workbook that I showed you on the screen, Yeah, send me a message and I'm happy to send it to you. Bruce from the Joinery Coach and Bruce from the Joinery Business Podcast. Hopefully you're doing excellent, and we'll chat with you next time. Cheers.